Hey everybody, my name is Isaac. This is the Colony Drop podcast where we talk about everything regarding Gundam, from the models to the shows to anything else that's new and interesting. I'm here with my co-pilot, Brian.
Hello, everybody. All right, Isaac, what are we talking about today?
Today we're going to talk about a recently released series called Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans.
Yeah, specifically Season 1 of Iron-Blooded Orphans.
That's right. There's 2 seasons, folks. It was a series that ran, I think it started in 2015, right, Brian?
Something correct. Like it aired from October 2015 to March of 2016. So Season 1 had 25 episodes, I believe.
Nice.
And Season 2 followed up in October of 2016, so 1 year later.
And for you longtime Gundam fans or you educated Gundam fans who are in the know, this series is not in the Universal Century. It's its own standalone timeline.
Right. So this takes place in the year 323 of the post-disaster era, which why don't you tell them what the disaster was, Isaac?
The disaster was a war of gargantuan proportions, Brian. Okay? It was a war involving Earth, Mars, the colonies. There were mobile suits, there were Gundams, there were mobile weapons, mobile armors. It was just mayhem, Brian. Okay.
Would you call it a calamity war, perhaps?
I would call it a calamity war completely, in every sense of the phrase.
So yeah, we're gonna review Season 1 of Iron-Blooded Orphans today. As a reminder, this series is available via streaming on Netflix, Hulu, Crunchyroll, and Funimation. So nice. You can pretty much find it everywhere. And then it's also available on Blu-ray.
Let me just get the ball rolling here, Brian. What did you think of this series going into it before you saw it? What kind of opinion did you have in your head, or how did you think it was going to go?
I didn't really know much about it, so I watched it after the fact. Probably not too long ago, maybe 6 months ago or so. I remember when it was airing, and the only thing I really knew about it was seeing the images of Gundam, of the main Gundam in the series, Barbados. If you just look at that Gundam, it has a very different look.
True.
Than typical Gundams. Just looking at that, I expected something slightly different, maybe.
Interesting.
And I think that's kind of what I got, right?
Yeah, definitely. Season 1 is... I think this season and series by extension is very different than almost every other Gundam series. And I say that as somebody who started this series and sort of went into it with dragging my feet in a way. I'm going to be honest. I looked at this series and I was like, oh, this looks terrible. but I could
just
play on
based
Netflix.
On the designs or what?
On a lot of things. We'll go into that.
All right.
On a lot of things. Number one, it wasn't the Universal Century, so I kind of prepared myself for, okay, they were doing really experimental things with this season, and it's going to be weird. Get ready, Isaac. And the other thing was, some of the first art I saw was, I think this was like way before it got released or dubbed. It was the shirtless mobile suit pilots, and I kind of just rolled my eyes. I was like, oh great, this is going to be a fan service series or something like that. It's going to be Gundam Wing without shirts. They're going to be like the hip boy band. And
wow,
I was like,
you were wrong.
Yeah, I'm clearly coming off as somebody that's just negative walking into something new. But in my defense, I was processing in my head how they could build mobile suits, put so much money and design into their engineering, and not design a cooling system for the pilots. The pilots had to pilot them without suits or without shirts because they just overheat. I couldn't understand it, but once you start the series, they do explain why they don't wear shirts sometimes.
Pretty quickly, actually.
And they actually don't wear... sometimes they wear shirts a lot. It's just not all the time.
So maybe before we get into it, we should have the disclaimer. Isaac has seen both seasons. I have only seen Season 1, and we're doing this review now on purpose because I would like to see how that difference maybe influences some of our opinions. Or if at all. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I won't be spoiling Season 2 for anybody listening or anything like that. I'll keep it strictly Season 1.
But on that note, we are going to spoil pretty much everything about Season 1. So if you want to watch Iron-Blooded Orphans, you should probably go watch it first and then come back and listen. So.
And if you don't care, just keep listening.
Yeah, maybe if you don't care, this review will make you want to watch the show, because I think it's actually totally worth watching.
Absolutely. As somebody who went into this season not being too excited to watch it, I have to say this is a pretty great season of Gundam. If you're a Gundam fan, mobile suit fan, mecha fan, you would be missing out to not watch this self-contained story.
I agree.
Yeah.
So let's start going down on some categories. So maybe we should start with, I guess, the story overall.
Let's do it.
Did you enjoy the story? I feel like there's different aspects to the story, right? There's what is your story at a high level, and then did you execute on that story?
I'm going to check all the boxes on this one. I felt like this was a very well done story. The pacing is great. Again, this is a Gundam series that's only 2 seasons, so they had to get it done right. All the beats are there. There aren't too many episodes that are really dragging on, or I just felt like it was a very well done story in a lot of ways because, as I said, it's a very contained story. It's really focused on a small group of people, and they're almost always on Mars or Earth. They briefly go to the colonies, but this might be one of the only stories in Gundam where they're not really involved in the colonies too much. What do you think about that, Brian? That was pretty surprising for me, but it was done well.
I agree. There was so little interaction with the colonies, with the exception of the Dort. I believe it was called Dort part of the story, which actually is a pretty key part of the story. But I didn't feel like we spent an inordinate amount of time on the Dort colony. But we spend so little time with the colonies in general. I feel like that had to have been done deliberately to maybe make it feel a little different.
Yeah, I'm going to completely agree with you there. At first, just how much time we were on Mars, how much time we were on Earth, and part of me was like, well, how can this be Gundam? There's no colonies. But it ended up being a really great season. I really enjoyed it, and it was a breath of fresh air that we weren't zipping around colonies, watching colonies get nuked or fall and all that. I was like, wow. For once, it shows that I guess Galahorn, the bad guys in the series, they got a pretty good grip on the colonies. They're not going to be, needing to start slapping them around left and right. And Tekkadan, our organization of heroes, our main characters in the story, the protagonists, they're not on the scale where they're going to be leading groups of colonies or invading multiple colonies at once. This is a very small mercenary organization.
Yeah, they're a lovable band of child soldiers, I suppose.
Or as you said in our last podcast, Brian, what'd you say? A band of misfits and
oh yeah. Well, that was
damaged children or something.
Yeah, that was how Peter Cullen, the voice of Optimus Prime, describes the crew of White Base in the original Mobile Suit Gundam trailer for Toonami. He calls them a crew of orphans and rejects.
Did anything stick out in the storyline that was kind of like a crowning moment of awesome for you?
Crowning moment of awesome?
What was a couple highlights that you really enjoyed this season?
Definitely everything involving Ein, the character Ein, and how he just snowballed into this tragic monster by the end of the show.
A tragic villain, if you're listening.
Yeah, for sure. So I think overall, this show did not beat you over the head with exposition, and it generally revealed everything to you in a sort of steadily paced, logical manner.
All right.
So, for example, in the beginning, there is an opening shot of the Gundam Barbados, and you don't know its name, but it's already in the background, and I think it's in like a mechanic hangar or something. And it's very different than maybe other Gundam series that revolves around children. Like, these kids are already around the Gundam. They already have it. You get the Whiskers Alaya Vinyana system. The whiskers related to the Alaya Vinyana system have a good subtle intro. You see, I think it's Mika doing some sit-ups. You see the holes in his back. And when he first turns on the Barbados, it has a number. And so that indicates to you that there's probably more Gundams out there, or at least more things like Barbados.
Exactly.
And then they slowly they drip the information to you about the Calamity War. And so overall, I thought it was, like you said, very well paced. They gave you the information you needed to get through the episodes. Not too much, not too little. But the one thing that was confusing to me was McGillis Farid and like just what his plan was the whole time, because he was playing a lot of 3D chess. And I think one of my crowning, what'd you call it? One of my
a crowning moment of awesome.
Crowning moment of awesome for this series was finally understanding his motivation, because I think in the middle I was a little confused, and maybe we'll get to that a little bit later when we talk about characters. Right. But by the end of the show, I just realized that this dude was a complete psychopath. He had one goal, and he was going to stomp on anyone to get to that goal. So,
absolutely. Yeah. I think it's at the final episode where he finally reveals his plan and why he's been doing everything for the last 25 hours.
Yes.
Yeah. But what stuck out to me? Well, this kind of dips into character a bit, but our pilot is on episode 1, minute 1. He's already a pilot. It's not a teenager thrown into a cockpit. It's not a student that, was given the access card to a Gundam. It's not, anything like that. He's actually a military pilot. I thought that was pretty interesting for the series to do. Also, how brutal it was right off the bat. In one of the earliest episodes, we just see Mikazuki. He executes the guy. I mean, the guy kind of coming, sure, but wow. They don't pull any punches in the show. They just start you off. I think it's episode 2 or something. He just executes this guy that he didn't like. The guy is unarmed, not in a mobile suit either. This was like in person. Like
You're right.
He just took a pistol and like shot him in the head.
Yep. Yeah, that was in episode 3. Not only was he unarmed, but I believe he was tied up, and he was laying face down on the floor. And the guy was, I think he was the boss of like first group or whatever it was called.
Right. Yeah. Not a nice
before
guy.
They were called Tekkaden. They were called what, Group 3, I think.
The Security Corporation, something like that.
Well, Gallarhorn had attacked the base, and Group 1 they retreated cowardly and left Group 3 or Tekkaden to fend for themselves. And so, they didn't expect Tekkaden to live, but they did. And then when they came back, they were obviously upset about it. So they tied them all up, and Orga was leader of Tekkaden, or arguing with the Group 1 boss. And he just, as he was arguing with him, Mika just went up and shot him in the head. So, and then on top of that, the first guy who spoke up right after Mika killed that guy, Mika shot him too. So they really don't F around, these Tekkaden children.
No, when there's new bosses in the company, you better you better sit up straight and hope you don't get called on and don't speak out of turn.
For sure. Yeah, brutality, I would say overall was a theme. It had to have been intentional, I guess. This was definitely one of, if not the most brutal Gundam series.
Definitely up there. Yeah, it's, dare I say, it was a very child-focused storyline. Trigger warnings, I guess. McGillis's backstory, that was very much about child abuse. Mikazuki's and everyone that's a human, what's the term? Human waste?
Human debris. Yeah.
Human debris.
Or at least it was human debris. So I watched the show subbed. I think you probably watched it dubbed. But it was human debris in the sub.
I'm pretty sure you're right. It was called human debris in the dub too. These human debris people are just, man.
Yeah, it's a rough world out in Mars.
Mars is under like the worst possible economy, because there's just like unemployed orphan children that are forced to be child soldiers or worse, I guess. It was just a very brutal storyline, but it really works, and you really enjoy Tekkaden as a group. They've got such a good diversity of characters. Orga's a really interesting leader. He's a very emotional and a compassionate leader. You really do feel the stress of him trying to keep everything together. Mikazuki's a pretty stoic character. Overall, they all did a really good job in the storyline, I feel, as far as balancing it out with different character personalities that really work together in a good storyline.
Agree. And this is also one of those shows that if they wanted to come back to it later, there's plenty of material to mine. Like maybe we could see the Calamity War one day.
I mean, there's no reason not to. It would absolutely be like a Gundam fest against mobile armor.
For sure. Yeah, even if it was a OVA or, it doesn't have to be a 50-episode TV series, but plenty of stuff to come back to. So there's a lot of lore.
We know how the Calamity War ends, but we don't know the battles for it.
For all we know,
Mars used to be much nicer. That might explain why Earth is so oppressive. Speaking of oppressive, what did you think about Galhorn as the villains, with our long history of different Gundam empires and states and organizations that have been plaguing Earth and innocent people throughout the existence of the Gundam franchise?
Well, I thought they were pretty good villains. They appeared more noble than a lot of villains. Like just the colors they wear are not typical villain colors, right? Like they wear. I guess I don't know what their official uniform is, but if I had to go off memory, I would say their colors are like blue, white, and gold, and those are traditionally very heroic colors.
Yeah, I really like that. To me, I saw that as Galahorn just being the epitome of arrogance, that they visually look like heroes, but they're just such a brutal, corrupt organization.
Yeah, agree.
It was a good change of pace, I thought, as far as villains go. They were not a rebellious group of colonies. They were almost like a mirror universe titans in a way. They're essentially a UN, right, that just has a monopoly on Ahab reactors and
Gundams, pretty much.
Yeah, Gundams
Ahab,
and mobile suits and weapons. So they're the biggest guns around. They're based on Earth, and nobody can really stand up to them. So they're the government now. That's
right. They're what happens when the victors never lose power.
Yeah, pretty much. They just grow corrupt over time, and yeah. I mean, literally, their whole government is just the descendants of the actual warriors from the Calamity War. It's very aristocratic, I guess, in a way. Maybe they kind of melded the Titans and Ramafeller from Gundam Wing.
With some suits that look very Crossbone Vanguard-like now and then.
A bit, yeah. Should we transition into the suits now?
Let's do characters first.
Okay, let's go for it.
Let's do the Tekkadan people first.
Let's do them.
We'll go by group. How about our protagonist, Mikazuki?
Mika. He didn't necessarily have a ton of range of emotions.
Yeah, that might be giving him too much credit.
He's a very stoic character. Orga actually has more emotions than Mika, but
everybody, yeah.
But they sort of do explain that, Mika's a bit more of a button-down, not cold-hearted soldier. He's not a cold-hearted guy, but he's willing to do the job that needs to be done, and he's very loyal to protecting his friends. And I guess as a lifetime as a child soldier, he's just kind of been numbed to an extent. He's a very interesting character, I thought. It was good that he didn't have to rely on magic powers, more or less, which is what some pilots are, like new types. Instead, he was more just about his own skills and having to learn through combat experience, and definitely working with the rest of Tekkadan. Teamwork was a big part of this series. It's not the lone mobile suit just invincible, crushing the enemy. It was very much a team effort, and all the other supporting pilots got to shine too. What'd you think about Mikazuki?
If brutality is a theme of the show, he is the poster child for the brutality in the show. Because like we said, he murdered the guy laying down on the ground. There's a part in the show when Orga's having his breakdown after Biscuit dies. Mika's trying to talk him out of it, and he asks him weird questions like, who should I kill next? Like, Mika is also kind of a psychopath, but he's like one that's on your side and good-hearted, I guess.
He's a weapon. He's a weapon. The pilot's a weapon. And in his defense, didn't they have to teach him how to read and write, along with a lot of Tekkadan characters?
They did. Kudelia, I'd say the main female character in the series, she does teach all the Tekkadan kids, including Mika, to read and write.
Man, how effective could the security company, how effective could they have been if a lot of their pilots couldn't read or write? Like, what if you're going over battle plans and there's numbers or notes?
Yeah, it's a little strange, right?
Yeah, I mean, these people. Well, I guess that explains the human debris, right? They were literally cannon fodder. They'd probably be put into a mobile worker that had some guns strapped to it, which it's a glorified tank, and then they'd be told to charge with the rest of their group into enemies.
Oh, the mobile worker, the ball of the post-disaster era. I liked how Mika's dream is to run a farm. Like, he has this wholesome dream to just be a farmer. Like, that's all he wants. Just leave the kid alone and give him a farm.
How did that come about? Is it just because on Mars they were pretty close to a farm, so maybe during training he would drive by and he'd be like, yeah, it'd be nice to sit around and watch the plants grow.
I assume that on that farm he would grow his prunes that he likes. His Martian prunes that they
keep him regular.
He's a weird kid, man. So for those of you who watched Gundam 00, there's this one line that's always quoted where the main character, Setsuna, always says, I am Gundam. I feel like Mika is much more I am Gundam than Setsuna is.
If Setsuna was a focused, trained to be a Gundam pilot, single-minded killing machine, Mikazuki is that to even a younger level almost, because this is all he's really known. He doesn't have the parents who are engineers at at the Gundam factory or something like that, and that's why he's so good at the Gundam. He's been a child soldier, clearly mistreated, and brutality is all he knows, but you still end up rooting for him in this show. Even me, somebody who usually roots for the bad guys in the Gundam series.
Isaac has a heart after all.
Yeah, usually I'm like, wow, okay, I can get on board with Tekkadan. Tekkadan was better than I thought. That's how you know the show's good, when I start supporting the good guy. Tekkadan was a pretty good organization. I enjoyed Mikazuki, and I'll put him on my list of Gundam pilots I really like.
I really liked him as well. The only downside, I think, is that based on his nature, he's probably not the most interesting character in the show.
No, but he works well in the ensemble.
I agree.
Yeah, right.
So I could see that being a criticism.
Speaking of most interesting character, who is the most interesting character in your eyes?
Ooh, the most interesting?
Season 1.
It probably depends on how you define interesting. But probably the most interesting was McGillis for me, just because I didn't know what... The whole time I was trying to figure out what this guy was doing.
The man's a mystery.
How about Orga, the leader of our pals, Tekkadan?
You know what? I'd say Orga was my choice for the most interesting character this season. Sure, McGillis is shrouded in mystery, and he's, always has his hand on his chin while he's scheming away. But Orga, you got to really see his progression in this season, almost as if he was the co-protagonist, or maybe even the main protagonist, just not in the Gundam. But it was great watching him evolve to be, a leader, and really had to face a lot of pressuring situations to try to keep everyone in Tekkadan alive. I thought Orga was a great character. Visually, it's an interesting design. You look at him, you don't really think that's going to be sort of the ringleader for the good guys. You're thinking maybe be somebody much older, older looking, different looking. Orga looks like he'd be like the loud, brash guy on like a Final Fantasy game or something, right?
Yeah, I think it's that hair.
Yeah, definitely. I thought Orga was great. He was a really good leader. He's a leader you'd want, I think. I mean, he might make mistakes and stuff, but he definitely cares about everybody underneath him. That's what I liked about Orga.
I agree. I think Orga, along with Kudelia, probably have the most complete character arc in terms of how much they change from the beginning to the end of the show. I think you said it well. You can definitely feel the stress that Orga has throughout the show of trying to keep this ragtag group of child soldiers together. You really feel for this guy. It's an unenviable position. I mean,
yes, it is.
He sends these kids into battle and they die, and he takes the blame all the time. That's just horrific. So, like we said, this show is really brutal. I would say it has a lot of teeth. And what did you call it again? My crowning moment of
crowning moment of awesome.
Crowning moment of awesome to me for the show, when I knew, I was like, I can't believe they just did that, was when they killed Biscuit.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And that just tore Orga apart. I think for at least 2 episodes, this dude was locked in his room, basically zoned out of his mind, crying on the inside because his best friend was murdered in front of him.
Right.
And Biscuit definitely had that aura of, this is a character who's too good to die, and we wouldn't dare kill him. But when they killed Biscuit, oh man, I couldn't believe it. I turned off the show and I was like, I can't believe Biscuit died. I can't. Why would you do that?
You walk to the kitchen and pour yourself a few fingers of whiskey.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess I'm kind of getting into Biscuit here, but Biscuit's role in the show is just to help Orga's character development. And so after that point, that's when Orga has to really mature as a leader and really commit to this getting Kudelia to Arbrow, or however you pronounce it.
As we transition to Biscuit, I completely agree. Biscuit had like this bubble of innocence around him. He had like a bunch of siblings that he cared for, right? He was such a nice guy.
He had the nicest sisters. They were named Cookie and Cracker. They lived on Mars in this like nice little farm, and they brought the Tekkadan people food. God. And then they killed Biscuit. How could you kill the sweet big brother of Cookie and Cracker? Come on.
Oh God, those names, those Martian names.
And that was after they showed his brother hang himself.
Oh yeah, Jesus. Oh God, so brutal. The killing of Biscuit, it would feel like, I'm not sure if you watch Lost or if our listeners did. If you watch Lost, there's a character named Hurley that everybody loves. It'd be like Hurley getting killed. It's just not done. You don't kill a fan favorite character like that. Somebody that's pretty innocent and the kind of happy-go-lucky guy of the group, but man, they just slaughter Biscuit to show that this show isn't messing around. Anybody can die, and they can die brutally.
Yeah, and not only do they kill Biscuit, but they dedicate like a whole episode to showing you exactly how Biscuit died, so that you really remember that, yep, Biscuit's dead and he's not coming back.
Yeah. But you know what? That shows us that the stakes were raised.
Agree. Yeah. That was probably when I was like, okay, the show means business, and I have to like it now. I hated that Biscuit died, but man, did I respect them for doing that.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
All right, how about Akihiro?
Okay, let me say this about Akihiro. I wanted more Akihiro. Akihiro, I felt, was a pretty interesting character. He's very angsty. He's almost like a bigger Mikazuki, I felt like, in a way. Like if Mikazuki was older and more experienced, he'd be a lot like Akihiro. But I thought Akihiro was a pretty awesome character. He's kind of their team tank, right? He's the tank on the team. He's gonna be the kind of the big gruff brother, the bear. You don't want to mess with him. He's not too fast and maybe not too bright, but man, he'll fight to the death, and he's got a pretty strong mobile suit, and man, he's a beast. But I really enjoyed his character, and once again, pulling the tragedy card here in Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans, the plot line with his brother was very tragic.
Oh, it was just so brutal. Another human debris story. He was separated from his brother, and as soon as we heard that story, we meet the brother, I think, in the next episode or two, which maybe was a little too quick, but after that story, you knew you were going to meet the brother. And man, the brother has just been abused for years, and he's basically lost it. And they get into this fight with the people who are in charge of his brother, and he tries to save his brother, and he can't do it. His brother ends up getting killed by a giant hammer, and it's terrible. But then Akihiro, this dude, he has the balls to say no. They end up capturing the suit that killed his brother, and he ends up piloting it. He gives us some new armor and repaints it. But wow, that was unexpected to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to pilot the suit that killed my brother, but mobile suits are hard to come by, Brian. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
Galahorn's got a monopoly.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely wanted more Akihiro. I think he was maybe my favorite Tekkaden member after Biscuit.
Yeah, it was always good seeing him on screen. I was like, oh, okay, this guy's here. He's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then there's one more Tekkaden person I wanted to mention. That was Atra.
Atra, yeah.
That was Mika's childhood friend, who may be the most adorable character in the show. And if anyone hates her, then you're just a bad person.
How old is Atra supposed to be in the show? Because it's a little nebulous.
I always assumed that she was about the same age as Mika. Let's check. So Atra is 16.
All right. Yeah. She could definitely be younger, but then again.
Yeah. Although I don't know if that's her age, maybe in season 2. So and she's somewhere from 14 to 16. But that's about the same as Mikazuki. But again, with the brutal backstory, she was homeless, waiting to get a job outside of a strip club, and that's when she met Mika and got a job with them. But wow, we haven't had backstories like that before in Gundam.
Yeah, definitely. She was a welcome comic relief, a little dose of, I guess, cuteness in the show. Maybe the only one, right? She's the only one that could kind of get away doing like the sort of childish kind of pranky stuff in a way. Atra was very much a short and sweet character. She brightened up the show, and she wasn't in it a lot. She came in and out in the season, and she was there when we needed her to cook stew.
She made the food.
She made the best stew those child soldiers ever ate. I don't know how she put in it, but man, they loved it.
And then how about our female protagonist, Cordelia Ina Bernstein?
What did you think about Cordelia, Brian?
Oh, so by the way, I gave everyone in this show, before I learned all their names and I couldn't keep up, I just started naming them after other characters. So Cordelia for me was Iron Locus for a while.
Iron Locus?
Because, she was analogous to Locus Klein from Gundam Seed. Because you have that whole sort of, I'm a princessy figure who wants to obtain peace for everyone and everyone to live a nice, happy life. And I feel like Cordelia was Locus, but done better. I don't feel like Locus did anything. She kind of just showed up all the time and was like, I like peace. And then, she'd say, and go get him, Kira, and then he'd go fly in. But I feel like Cordelia definitely felt cliche at first, but she was like so sincere throughout the whole show that she really grew on me. She had a real active role in the story. She gets taken down a peg right away by Mika in the first few episodes. Like, she's upset. A bunch of the Tekkadan members died, and she blames herself, and he tells her no one dies because of one person. And it just, I think it like shatters her sense of like importance. And then from that point on, she grinds her common rep. She works in like the cafeteria, helping make meals, and she starts making real decisions about what she wants to do. She gets so brazen that she signs up with Tewaz. And then she agrees to work with the Montag company. So she makes a lot of big decisions and really comes real far from being the daughter of a really important person on Mars. And her breaking point, similar to Orga's, the death of Biscuit, her breaking point is the death of her, assistant, whatever you want to call her, Fumitan. So I actually think that her arc and Orga's arc are very similar.
Absolutely. And getting back to the Lacus comparison, I agree. She's very much what Lacus wanted to be, but none of the pop star nonsense. If anything, she's more like a Relena rival, Relena Peacecraft from Gundam Wing. So they're very politically savvy. And initially, you kind of think they're just bratty and not really someone you want to see on screen too much, but they do kind of grow on you. And yeah, she definitely ends up running almost her own subplot, really, about the more political intrigue that Mikazuki isn't really going to get involved in, except just as a pilot. But hers was much more about the politics of this season. I enjoyed it for that, but I wouldn't say she was toward the top of my more favorite characters, though. But she needed to be in the story to keep it moving along. So thank you, Cordelia.
Yeah, Cordelia was the engine. Mika and Orga were the flare.
To an extent, this whole season is a glorified escort mission from a video game.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're protecting her, trying to get her from point A to point B, and stuff happens on the way. There you go.
And they just keep changing the goalposts, First it's in space, and it's on Earth, and there's a train, and then,
Oh, we beat the final boss. Like, no, you didn't. You had to fight these new guys. And then, wait, I thought we were going to point B. And like, well, you went to point B, A, but there's a point B, B.
And by the way, there's an election there, and you have to win it.
Oh yeah. The first time in a Gundam series where we hear the word election, I think. So even after the Calamity War, they have more democracy in this timeline than they do in the Universal Century.
Well, I guess one note on her assistant, Fumitan. So her dying was pretty predictable, but like Biscuit, it did serve a good purpose in the story. The only thing I wish there is that once we realized that she was going to betray everyone, I wish we would have seen like a full heel turn instead. At the end, she couldn't go through with it, and she ended up protecting Cordelia or whatever. Right. I just think it would have been more interesting if she just went full betrayal and killed a Tekkadan member or something.
Yeah, but I don't know. We'll see how that feeds into the next season, if anything. Yeah. But I do feel like that wasn't pivotal enough that it could have been done a different way.
All right, your pals
Gallarhorn.
Let's do McGillis for Reed. For me, I called him Iron Char from episode 1. I pegged him as Char right away. Do you do that too? Whenever you see a new Gundam series,
absolutely,
that's not Universal Century, you say, okay, who's my Char?
Right. You look for the blonde guy, or you look for the guy in a mask, and you're like, well, there he is.
Yeah. I didn't know exactly who would be Iron Char between him and Galio, but after, I think, episode 2, it was very clear that he was going to be Iron Char. But I will say, yeah, that cocky attitude. Out of all the Char clones that we've had, he's definitely the most conniving.
He might have outcharred Char at some point.
I think he may, for sure.
Char's looking for revenge, but McGillis is looking for, power. And oh boy, does he play everybody like a fiddle. McGillis, I felt, was a very good, almost understated villainous threat for this season. He's half an ally, half a villain. He's a frenemy, really.
But, yeah, the whole time you never know whose side he's on.
He's obviously not honest.
Right.
But it was very good having him on as a villain, very suave, and I felt like he really captured what Gallarhorn is as a very entitled, corrupt, and scheming threat in this universe.
It took a long time to figure out what he was planning, and it was confusing to me. He goes from just being part of Gallarhorn espousing wanting to fix Gjallarhorn, to then all of a sudden being the masked guy, when that's when he really becomes Char once he puts on the mask.
Of course.
Which by the way, when the first time he showed up with a mask, that came out of nowhere, and I was like, whoa, there, we went full on Char now.
It's like a mask and a wig too, like
yeah,
the biggest '80s rocker wig you've ever seen.
Yeah, and then he starts killing his friends.
Are they friends?
Well, I did believe him when he said they were,
His
but
bonds?
obviously not. Yeah. I think maybe he values them more as.
They thought they were friends.
Bonds. Yeah, for sure. Both of them did. And he definitely is, at least through season 1. He's clearly the best pilot in the show.
Yeah, he's a beast in a mobile suit, as befitting the person that would be Char. But I really liked everything about him. He's, 1 minute they need him, the next minute they're afraid of him.
It does seem like there's some sort of connection between Cordelia and McGillis. Like she's met him before. And I feel like that really came out of nowhere, but.
You'll have to tune in and find out what happens in season 2 with McGillis Farid.
A.k.a. Iron Char.
Yeah.
Lord Isnario.
I never felt much of a threat from Lord Farid. He was just too much behind his desk, I thought, this season.
Yeah, I agree. In season 1, at least, for being the guy in charge of the bad guys, he didn't really do much other than he filled a role. We don't know why he's in charge, really. Or one of the things that I found hilarious about the show, I don't know if this was done intentionally, but when you first meet Lord Isnario, he is in this enormous room, sitting at the smallest desk relative to the room size, doing nothing. It was like walking into the evil boss's lair, where he just sits at his desk all day with his hands clasped, waiting for the good guy to come in so he can explain his plan. So all you needed to know about him, I guess, was that he was evil, but yeah, he didn't really do much.
That office is actually pretty cool, though. I really like the massive window that looks over the ocean. But I agree, it's like a desk, and then there's one screen on the desk.
That's it.
And you just wait there for updates from whoever you sent out into the field.
All right, how about McGillis' partner in crime for most of the series?
Galio was a pretty cool guy, I thought. I really liked him as a character. Dutiful, you could say, as a Gjallarhorn officer. But still very threatening when you get him inside a mobile suit.
Agree, yeah. He's probably maybe not the second best pilot in the show. Obviously, Mika kicked his ass several times, very definitively. But he's definitely probably top 5 in the show. And he definitely had that one really cool Gundam. He was, I would say, pretty noble. Even though Gjallarhorn provoked a massacre at the Dort colony, he hated the massacre. That really wasn't what he wanted to happen. Similar to McGillis, he wanted to change Gjallarhorn. So I'm a little confused exactly why McGillis killed him, but so it goes. There's season 2.
He got used, sir. He got used and played like a piece on the chessboard. And when his time was up, McGillis let him die, and that was that.
I also named him Iron Garma.
Iron Garma. I just realized that. Yeah, he's essentially a competent Garma.
He's what Garma wishes he was.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, it was pretty cool to have somebody on the bad guy side that you could sort of root for in a way, because he wasn't a total monster.
Yeah, it was sad when he died, and I did notice that when he died, there was no body. So I'm hoping that he comes back in season 2.
We'll have to find out.
I'm hopeful. I want him to get revenge on McGillis. I feel like McGillis must be stopped.
You'll have to find out what happens next season, Brian, and so will the listeners. Should we move on to another category? Is there another character?
Oh no, we still got to do Ein.
Ein. You poor soul.
You poor soul. So Ein was maybe even a more dutiful officer than Galio. He lost his idol in Lieutenant Crank and just had the most conviction out of anyone in the show trying to get revenge. Mika kills Lieutenant Crank in episode 2? And that just sets off Ein on a warpath trying to kill Mika. And out of anyone who McGillis used throughout the whole show, Ein probably ended up with the shortest stick. Galio took Ein under his wing, gave him a better mobile suit, gave him some training. Ein goes out, gets really injured, protecting Galio. And the only way to save him, McGillis convinces Galio to give Ein the surgery that gives him the Elia Vignana system, which is just this huge sort of mark of shame to Gjallarhorn, because they view that system as, for the human debris.
It's beneath them, yeah.
Yeah. But not only does he get the surgery, but based on the diagram, I don't think he has any more legs. It if I'm correct.
No, it looks like there's not much there. They just hooked him up and put him in blue light. and
he's sitting in this tank. Yeah, it's just awful. And he ends up piloting what I call the Iron Psycho Gundam at the end. It's like just really big, and it's
pretty
just
awesome,
big.
though.
It's pretty cool. This big killing machine with axes. But yeah, at the end, there's a great line the McGillis says is when you completely realize that he played everybody and that he's just a psychopath. He tells Ein he hopes Tekkadan kills him because everyone is now viewing Tekkadan as heroes fighting a monster. And that's exactly right, because here's this Galahorn guy in this enormous suit just destroying this city that these people are living in. And if McGillis's plan is to expose the corruption in Galahorn and get public opinion to turn against them, I mean, what better way than to have this underdog fighting for the people group of Tekkadan take on this enormous suit piloted by this
monster?
I don't know.
The eyes of his own organization.
This man machine, monster. And anyway, poor Ein. That guy got it the worst.
Yeah, Galahorn could not have picked a more evil-looking mobile suit to put him in and send him out. For all their uniforms looking heroic and bright, they'd send out like a monster to go in and quell that city and defeat Tekkadan. It was not the right choice.
From a PR perspective.
Yeah, if they sent something with like angel wings and like a sword and a shield, it would have played better visually. But oh boy,
yeah,
and Gillis pulled it off.
The last Galahorn person I wanted to mention is Carta Issue. She's the third person in our sort of childhood friend triangle between McGillis and Galio. And she's just a terrible pilot. I don't know. She's part of the most powerful 7 Stars family. She's just bad at her job. I don't know. Did you take away anything else from that? Because she lost horribly every time that she tried to engage Tekkadan.
See, this is why Galahorn is inherently corrupt and ineffective, because you're pretty much in power in Galahorn just because of something an ancestor did, hundreds of years ago. It's not because you're a good pilot. It's not because you're a good strategist or a good officer or a good planner. And that really showed in her. Not only that, but if you've ever seen Last Exile, our listeners, she reminds me a lot of Maestro Delfine.
Absolutely. I was going to point that out later, but she does. She does look exact. Yeah, she looks like an inept version of Maestro Delfine.
Yeah, I mean, Maestro Delfine was pretty much winning until she made the mistake of like chaining up her enemy like within arm's reach, right?
Yes, which was probably was the best part of Last Exile, by the way.
She would have won if she didn't do that one mistake. But
Carta here.
Yeah, she was a villain a villainess we needed on screen to really hate and view as an enemy that we'd like to see destroyed. And I really enjoyed seeing her get defeated, especially since she was responsible for killing, a lot of Tekkadan people.
She killed Biscuit.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. I guess you did get a little sympathy for her at the end when there was a flashback where no one wanted to talk to McGillis, but she befriended him. She taught him to read, I think, when he was young. He was reading that book about birds. And then it turns out that she was in love with him. And that was pretty sad when Galio rescued her. Although she ended up dying from her injuries, he whisked her away from that battle. And she actually thought that Galio was McGillis and started confessing her love as she died. That was pretty sad. But at the same time, she killed Biscuit. So, you know what?
She was a villainess, but she was a very human villainess. She was capable of love. When she was a child, she was very kind, but she was power hungry and part of a corrupt organization. She was willing to use that power in ways that didn't create justice. And that's what happens.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah. So there are some people on the Tewas side we could mention. There's the leader, McMurdo Baristan.
I really like seeing him on screen. He was a pretty cool guy.
The only reason I bring this guy up is so that I can point out that I assume you really like him because he served cannolis with extra cream when Tekkadan visited him on his ship, which, by the way, had a lake and trees. So was it like a colony ship or just a ship? I'm confused.
Since he's the leader of Tewas, which they told us was a pretty powerful corporation, but they kept mentioning over and over that it was run like the mob, right?
Yeah, it was basically the Mars Mafia.
Yeah, I pretty much assumed that's why they
or was it Jupiter?
had cannoli. I think they're I don't think they're actually in Jupiter. I think you're right. I think you're mentioning about the cannoli. I think that was just another mafia sort of nod. They're saying, "Oh, look,
Yeah.
they even eat Italian pastry."
Yeah.
But as for his ship, I assumed he has enough money as a leader Tay was that he could put whatever artificial gravity they need to properly grow plants or whatever.
Okay. How about our friend who runs the harem ship, Naze Turbine? This dude wears a fedora hat in space.
But he looks pretty damn good doing it.
He does, yeah.
What were your thoughts when you saw the harem ship?
Well, we haven't had anything like that in Gundam before. I wasn't sure what to think at first. I was amazed by the one woman that he's probably closest to. I think her name's
Right.
Amida. She wears her pants so low. It was very distracting. But yeah, that was just very strange. We can get to that a little bit later. Maybe we can talk about observations. There was just a lot of sexual content in this show, which was not typical for Gundam. So I'm not really sure how I feel about that.
I'm just going to strike now while the iron's hot. I liked him as a character, especially, the sort of almost brotherly relationship he developed with Tekkadan and Orga especially. He was almost about the same age as Orga, it seemed, right?
I think he was a little...
More or
Well,
less.
Orga's 17. I think Naze was in his 20s.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, they both seem to be in somewhat similar leadership organizations of similarly sized organizations. And I don't know. I felt like he was a good addition to the story for that. He seemed like a pretty cool guy. I liked his style and all that. But the harem ship just felt sort of out of place. It almost felt fan servicey and a little cringy when I saw it. I was like, really? That's what they're adding to this season? Yeah, it's nice to look at and all that, but I felt like it was sort of offbeat for the rest of the season.
I agree. I think that whole thing was a little bit out of place, and I'm not really sure exactly what it added.
Nothing. It could have been done differently. Yeah.
I'm not necessarily one to oppose those things. If you want to put that in your show, that's fine. There's an audience for that. In this show, it seemed a little out of place to me.
Yeah, I could have done without it, but you know what? It happened, and
we move on.
Yeah, it happened. We moved on, and overall, this season was so well done that it didn't take anything away from it. So
the women on his ship though turned out to be some of the best pilots in the show.
they sure did. Yeah.
They schooled all the
with that little clothing, it's easy to maneuver in your cockpit.
Yeah. Okay, the last Tewaz person I wanted to mention was Maribit Stapleton, who, to me, I named her Iron Nina because her name is actually pretty similar, Maribit Stapleton, to Nina Purpleton. Do you think that was on purpose? She even dresses similarly. She's like a power suit.
Now that you mention it, is it Nina Purpleton?
Yeah, it's Nina Purpleton.
I think you're right. Yeah, she moved up within the corporate world. She wasn't just the engineer, right?
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah, she was pretty interesting, I thought too. I really liked seeing her on screen. She was a good addition to the mix. I kind of liked her more than Kudelia at some points.
She was a good foil for Orga to keep him in line, even though they probably never really listened to her. But I expect more from her in season 2.
You'll have to find out, Brian.
I'll have to find out. All right. The last thing I want to mention about characters is I nicknamed the guy they had to get to Arbrow to win the election. His name is Takanosuke Makanai.
Yeah.
I named him Beardy Guy.
Beardy Guy.
Yeah.
Or just I don't know, Island Santa, because he's got that cool island base, like his little retreat.
Yeah, exactly.
God, Tekkadan had no idea what it was doing. Like they showed up and by the way, I'm not the prime minister.
Yeah, it felt very much like a video game where you get there and like, oh, by the way, you have to get me there, and there's also an election and I have to win it.
Yeah, you deliver the king's sword and you get there and oh, there's a new king actually. You're like, oh, great.
Sorry about that.
But he was an interesting character. I liked how he was a pretty deceptive guy too. I mean, he comes off as so grandfatherly and stuff, and he kind of manipulates them to his own ends. There's that scene where his animation sort of changes. His face looks the same in almost every scene, right? Just his eyes almost seem closed and he's smiling and very, very warm. And then there's that one scene, I forgot who, I think he was just talking to Kudelia alone, and his face does change, and he really does kind of reveal that he's a bit sneaky and not necessarily playing with all his cards on the table.
He clearly wants to be the prime minister again, and he gets Tekkadan to get him there.
if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Political power and get me out of exile. Did they ever explain what he did to get exiled? I mean, for all we know, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, that's a good point. I based on the tone, I guess I would have assumed that Gjallarhorn manipulated
Arbrow.
the exile to some extent.
Okay.
But you're right. I don't think we ever got a reason.
Oh, okay. He was probably if he's willing to talk to Cordelia, I'm guessing he's at least somewhat pro, independence and autonomy for Mars.
Plus, he still has the favor of the people, so it couldn't have been that bad, I guess.
Yeah. Well, either way, I guess that's enough for Gjallarhorn to talk to whoever they have to talk to get him voted out of office.
All right, how about we move to mobile suits? And we're going to cut it there for this episode. Tune in next time for the conclusion to our Iron-Blooded Orphans Season 1 review, where we discuss the mobile suits and our overall thoughts on the series. Until next time, keep those Minovsky reactors warm.